So today I'm going to do some work on this 2008 Ford Edge. It's a nice little all-wheel drive car, but the problem is riding down the road it has a lot of road noise. At first it sounded to me like a dry rear differential or some kind of howling noise like that. I've gotten underneath there and given it a good inspection, and I really can't find anything wrong. I checked the fluid levels, I check all the bushings on the rear end to see where this road noise might be coming from. And after working on all of that, I think I'm going to replace both of the rear wheel bearing hub assemblies to see if maybe that's where the road noise comes from. I would like to know for sure before I started working on it. I don't. I can't figure it out. I'm going to replace those wheel bearings and I'll let you know if that solves the problem. So I decided to jack it up right here with a sort of swing arm joint here mounts on the frame, and then put my jack stand up here on the frame where the frame is connected to the rear bumper. Nice and stable and safe. I'm going to leave the jack sitting right there for now. I don't think it'll be in the way, and I'm going to pull the wheel off. Now before I get started here, I just want to say that doing wheel hubs and bearings on cars these days is a really pretty easy job. It's pretty straightforward. They're all kind of have a similar design. Many have a similar design. I picked these up. These are asbestos brand and different brands, all kinds of price ranges. I got these on rockauto.com. I think Rock Auto has the best prices and a nice selection, very, very fast shipping. I buy lots of parts from them. So let's just take a look at the part that I'm replacing here. So we have a spline shaft from the drive shaft that's going to come through here. It's going to have a big nut on it. We're going to take that nut off. And we have a few bolts right here that bolt this flange onto the assembly that's articulated for the wheel to go up and down. And also that's basically it. I'm going to pull the wheel off. We're going to do this. I'm going to use a few air tools for convenience, but I find that you don't really have to have air tools or anything like that. Just some hand tools and some patience and you can get this job done. You do need a large size socket to get the nut off the center axle here, and then you'll need a torque wrench to put that on properly. But basically we pull the wheel off, we disassemble the brakes, we unbolt this part, we bolt on the new one. You know, clean everything up nice with a wire brush, bolt on the new one, be good to go. Some have electric wires coming out of them if they have a speed sensor as part of the assembly. This particular time the kind has a sort of a little toothed gear with a little pickup there. It's mounted behind that. We'll see that when we get apart. Normally I would just go look in the book and see what the manufacturer or a repair manual might have to say about replacing a part. I've done this enough times I don't really think I need that this time, but I always like to know what is the torque going to be on this nut right here. That's kind of the most important measurement. And this asbestos kit has a little guide right here that tells us what that axle nut is torqued at for all these different vehicles that this part fits. So that's all I'm going to need for this. Let's get started. Here are two bolts holding the caliper bracket onto this assembly here, and so we're just going to take out those two bolts. I'm going to leave the caliper together with the pads installed. Usually I take them apart, but in this case they look like they're fairly new. I'm not going to take them all apart if I don't have to. These caliper bracket bolts can be pretty tight. I just impact them loose with a wrench and a hammer. No need to struggle. Now those are loose, I can just easily line them out with this ratchet. We have our caliper off with our pad still installed. Now I'm going to take a little wire and hang this up out of the way. And that should stay out of our way, and it's not putting undue stress on that flexible line. Now this assembly that this wheel rides on, that these brakes and this hub is on, this axle comes through here, is on a big articulated arm that can move up and down. And I went around and inspected every one of the bushings on this big drag link or trailing arm or whatever you call this part. Using a crowbar, I pried back and forth on every one of these large bushings to see if there's any play or anything in there that might be causing metal to metal between the rolling wheel and the frame of the car that could cause that noise problem. There's a lot of bushings on there. To replace that whole part, I'm sure would be expensive. That's a lot of work. It'd be pretty hard to do laying on your back in the driveway. Could be done. Probably take all day just to do one side. Anyways, I inspected them all real well. I didn't find anything wrong there. Here's our sensor connector right here for our wheel speed. Here's our parking brake cable connection right here. Our parking brake cable. Alright, gotta get that brake rotor off of there. Here's our parking brake shoes. And this rotor is a little rubber cap you can pull off. To adjust the parking brake shoes, you can dial that little adjuster right there with a screwdriver through that little hole in the rotor. This nut happens to be a 32 millimeter. I have to get a breaker bar and break it loose. So I'm just going to put a crowbar in here so that the hub can't turn. I'm going to use a little leverage here to work this loose. I don't want to knock the car off the jack stand or anything. So I'm just going to go careful and loosen that up. There we go. Older cars are all rusted out and stuff. You want to clean off that thread before you take that nut off of there. This one has a second nut right here. Looks just like this one. I'll work that one loose. Alright, that's how that comes off of there. Now it's important that this hub is not stuck on the spline shaft of this axle, kind of bonded to it or arrested to it. It's important that it slides off of there and that the axle stays there, otherwise you'll pull the CV joint apart. So all I do is just put this nut on here a little bit, tap it with the hammer, and I can see the shaft move in and out. I know it's not stuck on there. If that doesn't work, you can rig up a puller and pull it from here. We haven't even gotten to the hard part yet. Now we're going to get into what is going to be the hard part of this job. Some folks will say you have to take off this whole trailing arm or swing arm or the control arms and the shock and all the parts to get this off of here, because holding this hub on here are Torx head bolts, and they're kind of obscured there by the tone ring or the sensor for the wheel speed. And if we could look right down there, you can see the head of one of those bolts. So there's one of those Torx head bolts there. Might have a T60 socket to try to get in here like this. And it's just not going to fit because that tone ring is in the way. Can't get straight onto it there. I can barely get the tip of the tool bit in there, but that tone ring is in the way. Maybe right here you can just look in this mirror and see. That Torx head screw you have to get at, that bolt. It happens to be a T60, and the parts I have off the shelf just aren't going to fit in there because the shaft hits that tone ring. And so what I'm going to do is take a trip to Harbor Freight and pick up a set of impact Torx sockets that have a little longer shank. And this set here is 29 bucks, and I've pulled off the Torx bit that I'm going to use. Now I'm going to grind the shank down on my grinder until I have the clearance I need to get that bolt loose. Alright, now I can get my Torx bit in there straight on. I got a 1/2 inch drive. I'll try and break those loose. Alright, so that was pretty hard. Using this tool, I ended up taking it down a little bit further because when you start to unscrew the nut, this part will bind on that timing wheel. And so I ground that down just a little bit closer to the end, using my adapters of different length to be able to get in there, get a breaker bar on there or this ratchet on there, and crack each one of the 4 loose. When I went in there by hand, I loosened them up about 6 turns. You can't loosen them out all the way because they hit the ring. So I've loosened them up about 1/4 of an inch each way. Now I want to loosen this hub and start to get this out of here. Alright, got that hub loose. Now I'm going to take those nuts out the rest of the way and then I can get the hub off. Alright, so now we start putting some of this stuff back together. I like to put a little anti-seize on everything as I put it back together. So it won't be all rusted and corroded. And I got 2 bolts started. Go around and put those Torx back on there and tighten them up. Okay, 4 Torx bolts are back in and all tightened down. Can't tell a lie, it's pretty difficult. Got to use a little mirror, be able to see, put that Torx into the bolt head there, and take a little patience, a little grunting, get that done. So I have this little book where Asbestos put in their new hub box there. It's the torque specifications for the axle nut. And we have a Ford Edge all-wheel drive. We have a 2008. It says here what to torque the front ones to. Right here is for the rear. It says go to note 44. We got to go back here and find note number 44. Note 44 says inner nut torque 203 foot-pounds, outer nut torque 129, 200 and 130. All right, great. So we torque the inner nut to 200, and we torque this outer nut now to 130. Now I'm going to put some anti-seize on all this stuff here so that the rotor doesn't stick to that shiny metal right there, get all rusted up, put the brakes back together. Make sure this flexible line's not all twisted. Tighten those caliper bracket bolts back up. Torque those down and we'll be done with this side. You know, even if this took you all day long, you save yourself $1,000 doing it yourself. Definitely worth doing, not an impossible job. Only special tool you need is the one you're going to make out of this Torx right here, out of this T60. That's what you need to get this job done. T60. Had to buy the whole set from Harbor Freight for 29 bucks. Would have bought just one if I could have found it, but I think Snap-on carries these. I don't know if Craftsman has one, something like that. That's how I had to grind that down. Now I'm going to go do the other side. always use a jack stand. Now that I've already done one and I have my special tool made, it only took me maybe 15-20 minutes to take this side apart. And I'm glad I kept on working, because I think this is the bad hub here that makes all the noise. A little bit of play in there, kind of a rumbly sound. They probably both made noise, but keep on working. Got the new one in on the other side, all nice. I got this new one here all unpacked and ready to go in. The new ones are tight because of the new seals and all, and there's absolutely no play in them. Put the second side in there. You might go to the shop and they might tell you, oh yeah, you need special tools and a trailing arm and $500 parts and all that's baloney. It's just a bearing. You just replace the sealed bearing. You might think it's a bad deal for a bearing to go only 50,000 miles or something. Well, 50,000 miles, that's twice around the circumference of the earth. You know, it's pretty far. They're good bearings. They last a long time. It's just a job you got to do. Simple hand tools. Save yourself $1,000, or at least know what it is you're getting fixed when you go to the shop. Some people want to earn a whole week's pay on one job. So it only took me about an hour to do the hub on this second side here. I took a little extra time to replace a broken link for the stabilizer bar. Well, all that's left now is take it for a road test.